Hello and welcome to Family Tech, where you get to be the tech expert of your home. Today, my guest is Shelley Delane, who is the chief mom at Pinwheel. Shelley, first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what is a chief mom and what kind of things you do for Pinwheel?
That is a great question. Everybody wants to know what a chief mom is. And the answer is it's a lot of things. Um, I am a single mom of an 11-year-old about to enter middle school.
Fun.
And I joined the Pinwheel team a few years ago when I was looking for a phone solution for my own kid. And Pinwheel hadn't even launched to public sales yet. And I have a background in marketing and working with startups and doing consulting work of that sort and in community development and lots of things that Pinwheel needed at the time. So I joined, and chief mom was my way of saying, like all moms, I'm here to help with whatever's broken right
Right.
now and needs fixing. And that's still more or less what I do. Somebody
That
spills the milk, I'm there to wipe it up and try and keep it from spilling again.
That makes absolute sense because as moms, we wear so many hats. We're the chauffeur, we're the cook, we're the cleaner, like all of the hats. So that totally makes sense to
and
have that position in a
and
company that's
startups
brand
and
new.
kids are very similar, as it turns
Right.
out.
Startups and kids are very similar. And I'm sure everyone's curious because I was curious when the stream started. What is that payphone that you are talking into?
So this is actually my headset from my computer. It plugs into my computer and it amuses me, but it also works better because I lose AirPods and can never keep them connected. And this is just like it works. Plus, it lets me do this and it makes me feel like I'm 15 again. So
Yeah. It does make me like I would over the weekend I was in Mammoth with my family and saw a actual payphone and like I picked it up and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, nostalgia." Like this is bringing me super back like, 30 years.
exactly. Plus, fidgeting with the like curly cord like
Oh my gosh.
never gets old. That is still gratifying.
Yes. Like I remember like just constantly wrapping it around my finger, unwrapping it. Like, wow, that's like the original fidget spinner for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I love it. I'm gonna have to check on Amazon for that, like as soon as I'm done here.
And I will tell you, one of the other things that it does for me personally, like having the analog thing reminds me also of when I was a teenager. I don't know if it was this way in your house or not, but when I was growing up, my mom taught us, like specifically, how to answer the phone politely, how to take a message, how to end a phone call politely, and all of those things. Like that was actually like a thing that was taught. And
Yeah.
one of the things that this does for me, like having this, it reminds me of like we used to start off learning that simple process, and now kids are often given a phone that is not even this simple. It's got like the whole world in it, and a lot of kids aren't taught anything. So
Right.
like it also keeps me grounded in remembering just how many skills go into a kid using a phone well.
Yeah, for sure. I love all of that. Just it sounds like so much fun. Like I said, I'm gonna check out Amazon as soon as we're done chatting here. So let's talk about AI because that's what we are mainly here for. So AI technology is everywhere these days, and especially with the explosion of ChatGPT and even adults. Like so. Not only ChatGPT, but there's, the Photoshop has their generative AI. Like everything's got, a little AI piece to it now. So even adults can have a hard time figuring out what's real, what's not. So how should we talk to our kids about reality and AI? Like what should we be discussing with them?
Okay, I love that you're jumping straight into the reality question because that it's
Yeah.
such a thing always on my mind and it just comes up so much.
Yeah.
Um, And one of the things that I've seen be effective for me, and that I have been seeing other people leaning into also, is understanding that, one, the more you are familiar with the tools, like learning new things as we get older, it's hard to find the time, it's hard to find the enthusiasm, but like the more you're familiar with the tool yourself, the more able you are to guide your kids. And then also recognizing that the more kids are grounded in assessing and evaluating the physical world around them, the more able they are to discern real from not real online. Like those physical world skills do translate some to the online world. So like even things like getting kids to question, like they hear something and being able to like learn to question, like, was that true? Or I said something, was that true? Was that really what happened? Like, is that act, could this be seen another way? And teaching kids to think critically about all the input they get helps to frame that conversation around the online world also, because the amount of stuff they can fake now is, it's really dizzying. And it's really dizzying. And also, once you understand the tools and can guide kids, the more kids can see what the tools are capable of, that also helps. Like, I know with my kid, like before joining Pinwheel, I did graphic design work for a million years. So like Photoshop is my backyard. I used to teach Photoshop.
Nice.
So like I know, and like I know that when Photoshop first came to the fore, people were shocked when it came out, like just how manipulated images were on magazine covers and all of that.
Right.
And we never really even dealt with that very well, frankly. But we did learn to spot it more, right? But like now, it's pervasive. Any images you see online are likely to not quite be real. So noticing what the tools are capable of and how it differs from what you see in real life. Like when you see someone, like right now, even now joining this, it asks you, do you want the camera to touch up your appearance?
Right.
And I was like, no, that's okay. I'll go
good all
undercut.
natural.
I'll go how I am. But because of things like that, like it's so pervasive that teaching kids to recognize the way people look online isn't the way they always look in real life. And like noticing the world around them and noticing the differences with the online world helps to point that out. Plus things like count the fingers. Do you know that one?
No.
AI image generators, they're getting better at it, but AI image generators are terrible at doing hands still.
Oh, yeah.
So when you look at an image, like always look at the hands, because an easy tell is if it has 6 fingers or the fingers are really long or weird looking, it's probably AI. It's like a quick shortcut to discern that.
That's a great tip. I did like so on TikTok that I always call it the Remini app because I love like Leah Remini, but
I love her too.
But it's the like Remini or something like that. Anyway, there's an app that is very good at like generating like headshots and things like that. Like, people are using it for like their LinkedIn profile. And so there was a lot of like TikTok like reactions to these like images, and one of the ones that I reacted to on my YouTube is a lady who was pregnant and like had her arms, and then there's like 4 arms. Like so it generated like all of these arms like holding her belly, and it was so funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I replayed that one because I'm like, oh my gosh, this one's hilarious because
that is hilarious.
It's all the arms. But that's a really great tip to like count the fingers, look at the hands, because AI is not that good at that.
And one of the other things like that I was looking at recently with the one that does headshots, it's also a good example of the way the data that AI is trained on can affect the outcomes.
Mhm.
Because there was a young woman who posted an image. She had taken a photo of herself and run it through the headshot thing to use for her LinkedIn thing and
Mhm.
asked it to make her look more professional. Did you see this one?
I might have. I mean, there was, like, several that I looked at, but yeah.
So in this case, she
Oh,
wanted it
I
to.
it changed her, race. Is this the one you're talking about? Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the one
yeah.
I'm talking
Okay. Yeah,
about.
yeah, 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 keep going.
And so the AI's understanding of what would make her look professional wasn't changing her outfit. She was wearing a sweatshirt. It
Right.
was changing her face to look less Asian and
Yeah,
more Caucasian.
right.
And that is a problem,
Huge problem.
but it's also part and parcel of like the machines only know what they've been trained on. And when the data set that they're trained on has that bias in it,
Mhm.
you can't blame the machine for
Right.
drawing that conclusion.
Yeah, yeah,
We
you
might need to
programmed
look
it.
at
And not you, but,
it. Well, and it's not even directly related to the people who built it.
Right.
It's just based on that's the data that's out there and the way our biases have been skewed. So, one of the things that I have hope about with AI is it can actually help us to see where collectively we still have a lot of embedded bias in the world,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that we can maybe transcend that and get better about it
Mhm.
because we can see it more like, oh.
Yeah.
So AI as self-reflective tool for humanity.
Right. Yeah, well, and because I can imagine that the data set that it's being programmed with is like, okay, these are all like the CEOs, and all of the CEOs were like,
At least it didn't give her a mustache.
I know, right? Oh, well, thank goodness for that, right? But yeah, so like, all the data set is like, oh, okay, so these are like the professionals. So it also shows that we need more diversity in like in the management of the companies. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that makes
Exactly. And
sense.
that's what I mean. Like, if we interpret it that way and go, well, wait, why did it draw this conclusion?
Right.
What's going into it that would lead to that? Oh, wait, maybe there's a bigger problem here we need to look at. Like, that could be valuable. And those are the kinds of things that, like, if kids are taught to look at it that way
Mhm.
and to question, like, why did it say that? Was that true? Like when kids are taught that it's okay to question things and not just accept them,
Yeah.
they're the ones who are going to be the next generation of builders who are going to inform like what these tools turn into and how they're used in their adult life. And like I sure as heck want them thinking about it and questioning it because
Right.
while they're still young and optimistic and creative and can come up with like, how do we solve systemic bias in hiring?
Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like,
But
go
kids
for it,
come up
kid.
with brilliant ideas, so you
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah, it could happen. But that also leads me. I was just talking yesterday on my other podcast called the Not Null podcast, and we were talking about the Amazon is testing out AI generated reviews. So it's basically aggregating all of the reviews and saying, "Hey, so most customers are saying this." And it's overwhelmingly positive, and, again, that's because, if you've got 200 reviews to go through and there's 200 or there's like, 195 positive reviews and 5 negative reviews, it's going to be like, okay, well, those are outliers. And so I'm going to like take that out and just aggregate the positive. And so that's kind of the same thing where the majority is this. So it's going to kind of take those, that diversity and those outliers out of the equation because statistically it doesn't matter, to the statistics.
Mhm.
So that's super interesting.
And I've been keeping an eye on that too because you're right. Like that is a great example of I get it. That does
Mhm.
have some value and there's some problems with that approach.
Right.
Like, I'm hoping that it will still make all of the original reviews available and not just replaced with the aggregate. Like, that seems to be where they're going, but
I'm
like,
sure they will. Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But what my suggestion was, like, it should aggregate all of the 5-star reviews and aggregate all of the 1-star reviews. Say, like, these are the, like, the negative things people are saying, and this is the positive things people are saying. And then that way it's a little more balanced because they can pull out those outliers and aggregate that and this, so it's a little more balanced.
That's a great idea, because I know for me, a lot of times, like, that aggregation is kind of what your brain does anyway when you're skimming through reviews. You're looking for
Right.
the same keywords, you're looking for certain things, like, you're looking to see, like, how common is it that I see this? So, like, the aggregation makes sense.
Yeah.
But I, for one, almost always click on the most negative reviews first.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's
I
actually
gotta
what I
see what
wanna
they're
see.
saying. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, "What's the problem here?"
Like, when I Google something, I'm like, "Something, something sucks,"
Right,
so I
exactly!
can see
I'm
what.
glad I'm not the only one that does that,
Yeah.
because I find it very useful. Because there's
Yeah.
always the congratulatory things out there and the self-promotional things out there, and the fans of something are easy to find, but, like, what's
Right.
wrong with it? Like,
Yeah.
what do I really need to know to make a good choice on this?
Yeah, for sure. So, we're kinda touching on this already, but do you think AI is dangerous technology? We should leave it alone, or do you think it can be helpful? Basically, are robots going to kill everybody and take over the world, or can we rein it in?
So, we as in you and me? No.
Yeah.
Nope. Mm-mm. Nope. It's just good. That's just, we're going to ride out whatever comes, and we're going to
Right.
try to prepare our kids for whatever comes. Because I don't know about you, but I am not in that much of a position of influence presently.
Right.
Um,
Samesies.
I do have hope that we'll see. Like, to me, it is on the level of when nuclear weapons were first proliferating,
Mhm.
in that we actually may need international agreements around what is and isn't allowed. Because there are certain things that, not that I think, not that the computers are not going to take over the world. That is not actually the risk. That may someday be a risk, but where we are right now, the bigger risk is that it allows people to potentially cause harm easier and faster and on a broader scale than they could have without access to this technology.
Sure.
So it may mean that we need some way to restrict or require a certain level of licensing for access to certain levels of the models, or we may need, some other regulatory framework and agreements to prevent that.
Yeah.
Whether or not that will happen, don't know. I hope
TBD.
so. Still a work in progress.
Right.
Don't know. And the consumer level technology that we all have access to, I'm not concerned about.
Sure.
Honestly, I am concerned about certain impacts of it on kids if they're allowed access to it with insufficient supervision.
Yeah.
But that's true for me of all technology that is designed for adult use. Like, that's,
Yes.
but the consumer level technology, I'm honestly not super concerned about. It doesn't have enough agency
Yeah.
or intertwinedness with critical infrastructure to cause damage.
Yeah, so my Roomba is not going to become, like, self-aware and start attacking me.
No, although if you have a cat, then I would be concerned, because if the cat can hack into it and cause it to start shooting lasers, we are all done for.
Sure. Beware of the cat. Luckily, I'm allergic to cats. I have a dog, so.
This is why you will survive the Roomba apocalypse. You didn't have a cat.
That is why I will survive. Phew, thank goodness. So let's dig into a little bit more, like, 'cause you said controls over adult level technology, which I totally agree with. This is like my whole platform. So Pinwheel, the company you work for, the creators of a kid safe smartphone, recently launched an AI tool similar to ChatGPT called PinwheelGPT, like aptly named. So what makes PinwheelGPT safer than something like ChatGPT?
So, two things with PinwheelGPT. One, it does run on the ChatGPT model, so it's got that processing power, but it has additional like safeguard layers built in around it. So the kid says something, but there are layers of guardrails in between to help guide the model towards age appropriate answers and to defer to the parents if it's something that's like, you should talk to your parents about that. And actually, it's
I
so
love
hilarious.
that.
It's
Yeah.
hilarious though, because at one point during the testing process, like, because you're always like dialing in, like, how much, like, how cautious should you be and where should you be on these things? And at one
Yeah.
point during the testing, I had my daughter, like, just interacting with it and testing the current construct.
Sure.
And we'd had the safety features dialed up a little too far. And she asked how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it said, on this sort of topic, you may wish to discuss that with your parent or a trusted adult. We laughed so hard but it turned out it was because it used the keyword knife, which can be associated with
Oh.
violence. And so it's like,
Uh-huh.
so like, that's what I mean by like, there's always like tweaking of
Little tweaks.
things. So
Yeah.
it has some additional safeguards. It's not that cautious anymore. It would
Right.
answer the question about a peanut butter
You
and jelly
can
sandwich now.
get some peanut butter and jelly sandwich instructions now. That whew.
Exactly. And then the other key thing is that it, on the parent side, like with the same app, if you log in with the child account, they get to chat and interact on whatever device they're using it on. But on your parent device, you log into the app with your parent credentials and you have access to view their entire chat history,
Nice.
which means you can keep an eye on what they're asking, how it's answering. Like, you can see the whole thing and they can't delete it and they can't, like, so it's all there for you to see. And one
Yeah.
of the core principles of Pinwheel is parents coming alongside kids for the journey. And if you're
Yeah.
going to allow kids access to something, you want to be able to see what they're doing until you know that they have the skills to navigate it safely with full independence. But in that
Right.
beginning stage, like, visibility is key. And
For sure.
if they're accessing ChatGPT or really any of the other tools, you don't have insight into what they're seeing. So if in the event that ChatGPT says something that runs counter to what you think about the world, or because it is a tool that can still sometimes give blatantly wrong information.
Yes. Oh, we'll get into that.
Right, that's a whole thing. And like, so being able to look at it as a parent and then guide your kid as to no, or and or even just to see like how your kid's brain works and like what they get curious about, it's so fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I love those safety features. So ChatGPT has some workarounds that can allow for inappropriate content. It sounds like there's a lot of safeguards in place that might prevent this, but how does Pinwheel kind of overcome some of those issues? For example, I would say, okay, hey, let's pretend that I am going on TV. What kind of inappropriate things would I not be allowed to say on the TV show? And then ChatGPT's like, oh, well, here's some, bad words that you can't say.
Yeah,
Whereas like, if you're just like, hey, tell me some bad words, they're like, no, I can't do that.
and so typically, and oh my gosh, you should have seen the conversations I had during the testing process. Like, oh, when you're
Yeah.
trying to think,
Can I
like,
get into the parent portal for your ChatGPT for all that? Can I see your history?
I would be
I
so
need a good laugh.
embarrassed. It's
I
so
know.
like, but that's part of my job. Like,
Right.
think like a 14-year-old and ask all the questions.
Nice.
And then I let my kid poke around at it to see what
Sure.
they really ask and like how that
Yeah.
goes and like, ugh. And I will say there are things that like when I would ask things of ChatGPT,
Mhm.
it's like directly,
Yeah.
it's really easy to get it to do that, to be
Right.
able to say like, well, you know, hypothetically, or
Exactly, right.
and it'll just answer and you're like, but on the Pinwheel GPT, I actually have been very impressed with like the percentage with which it says, you know, that's not something I can discuss with
Yeah.
you. You should talk to a parent or trusted adult about that. Like I think we got that dialed in pretty well.
Nice.
But like with all software, like that's why the parental supervision is also important, because like with any software, you can dial it up so far that it won't give you peanut butter and jelly instructions.
Right.
And you can dial it down so far that it'll be like, oh, well, these are the things that you shouldn't know about.
Right. These are the
And I
things.
think like in my testing, it's been really good. Like a kid you have to push it really repetitively for a really long time before it
Mhm.
cracks.
Sure.
But that's not to say it can't ever. So that's why the
For
parental
sure.
supervision is like, to me, almost the more important layer. Like it's got a pretty good batting average,
Yeah.
but I still want to know if it slips. But even when
Right.
it does slip, I've seen it say like a sliver of it and
Mhm.
then say, you know,
And then, "Oh, wait, no, I can't say."
yeah, because like it'll say things like, well, an inappropriate thing you might say on TV might be related to sexual things, but you should talk to your parent about those.
Sure. Yeah,
So
that
it'll
makes sense.
say like a little bit of it, but then it
Mhm.
defers to the parents. So
Yeah.
fingers
No, I love
crossed.
that. Yeah,
It's
fingers
big.
crossed. Yeah, and like you said, with all technology, that nothing's gonna be perfect. So there's going to be, things that happen. And so that's why I love that oversight with the parent portal. Quick question on that, like just because I haven't even tested it out yet. I keep meaning to. So I apologize about that.
It's all
But
good. Time, I know.
I know, right? But is there like any alerts like that would come to my phone that like, hey, they've been asking this like question over and over again, or if it's something like a super concerning question where it's saying, hey, you should talk to your parent about that. Is it going to alert me for any of that, or do I need to like go in and check it?
Not presently.
Mhm.
Presently, it's constructed as a just check it. Just
Right, right, right.
just check it.
Yeah,
It is entirely possible because that's a great idea, and it isn't because they're still adding features. Like it was just launched, and again, like any
right.
software, you add features and things over time. And I know that they are working on other notification features and things like that because
Yeah.
you don't always have time to check it all the
Right. And
time, especially when
that's
they've
the
had it
thing.
for a while. So yeah.
Yeah, you're not like, "Oh, I gotta go like, check my ChatGPT." Like, well, that's probably not gonna
And
happen on a frequent basis.
honestly, with my kid, I just worked it into my daily check of all of her things. Like I
Sure.
have a habit of like daily, just when I'm doing my like end of the day, checking my work messages for last things and checking my email for the morning, checking my calendar and checking her things. Like
Yeah.
the GPT is like just part of it now.
Just another thing on the checklist. That
And it's
makes
pretty
sense.
quick generally because like
For sure.
it's scroll
You
through
just
and
see
be
the,
like,
like, questions and yeah.
exactly, like you asked what?
Yeah. You don't know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I can teach you how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
But sometimes for kids, it's just about them wanting to know how it responds.
Yeah.
Like the information isn't even always the important part for them, like depending on the age of the kid. And I've had to coach mine to make it more about like things you actually want to know
Right,
because it's
right.
not designed as a conversation partner. That is not how ChatGPT is really designed.
Yeah.
It's more for synthesizing information
Yeah.
than for just being a casual. Like it's terrible at telling jokes. Don't ask it.
Yeah.
It's terrible. The jokes they're so bad. They're terrible. I do not recommend the joke telling.
Like, there's a level of dad jokes, and then there's, like, PinwheelGPT jokes.
Well, and Chat GPT in general,
Right,
like
right,
it's not
right.
even a. It's just a like one of them was, why did the worm cross the playground?
Why?
To get to the gym.
What? Well, obviously. I mean, Shelley, I don't know why you didn't assume that.
Like, and then it's the funniest part is when you're like, I don't understand, and with Pinwheel GPT, with ChatGPT, it tends to just get like condescending, but with Pinwheel
Sure.
GPT, it sometimes goes into, well, if you didn't understand, you might want to ask your parent or a
Yeah.
trusted adult, and maybe they can explain it to you.
They can
And you're like,
explain the joke.
but no,
Like,
it
no, my
was just
parent
a
didn't
bad
get it
joke.
either. Yeah. My parent didn't understand why a worm wanted to go to the gym anyway.
Right? So yeah, that's the only. I'm like, it's much better at things like, what are some interesting science experiments I can do in my kitchen? It's great
Right.
at stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, speaking of that, so it is built on ChatGPT. So ChatGPT has a problem with inaccurate information or what they call hallucinations. So, how accurate is the content coming from Pinwheel GPT? Like, does it have the same issues, or is there some things in place where Pinwheel's like, hey, that's not exactly right? Like, any safeguards there?
So there is, and I will say, like, if you've really gotten into, have you used ChatGPT much? Has that
Yeah,
been,
not a ton, but yeah, I've used it a few times.
because if you're using ChatGPT and you ask it to check for accuracy,
Yeah,
its accuracy rate goes way up. It doesn't do it by default.
sure.
But if it says something and you're like, wait, I'm not sure that that's correct. Can you give me accurate information?
Yeah.
It'll sometimes be like, oh, I apologize. Actually, okay, this is terrible, but a friend of mine, when I was first trying to wrap my brain around ChatGPT, they quipped that ChatGPT is kind of like mansplaining as a service,
Yeah.
where it will confidently give a plausible answer to anything you ask it without regard for it actually being true. Anyway, I found that hilarious, and it helped
I'm
me set my
gonna call it that
expectations.
for the rest of my life. That is so perfect.
It's so perfect.
Yeah.
Anyway, with Pinwheel GPT, it does have in the framing around it like encouragement for it to check for accuracy before
Nice.
responding, and so I have found its batting average to be pretty good. But again, especially if you're like pushing it like kids sometimes do,
Right.
it'll just make something up just to get you to stop asking.
Right. It's a parent.
Exactly. So like it is kind of comical because I'm like, I feel you. I feel you, Pinwheel GPT. I feel you. I do. I feel you.
I got you back. But why? But why? But why? Like, oh, it's magic.
And it's more patient than me.
Yeah.
And it knows more than I do. So,
Right.
on the whole, it comes out okay. But another reason you want to keep an eye on it, because yeah, when it devolves into like, wait, what?
Yeah. You should. That doesn't make any sense. So what, like, we just kind of touched on this already, but what are some of the best uses for something like Pinwheel GPT? Like, give me a science experiment or something like that. I thought that was a great example. Are there any other like really good examples of that? And sorry, my Roomba is just like emptying its canister and it got real loud for a second. So I apologize, but somebody is vacuuming my house for me at the moment. So not somebody.
I welcome our
The
robot
robots.
overlords.
I do too. Always
They
thank your
vacuum.
robot. Yeah, I know. Thank your robot assistants because someday it's like, oh yeah, this one said thank you, so we'll let them be.
Exactly. Well, I have found that like for using Pinwheel GPT, like brainstorming ideas for things, it's actually really good at. Like at my daughter's school, every year they have market days where the kids like come up with their own business and they make stuff and sell it at the market, and like coming up with ideas for like, what do I want to make, and then how do I make it, and how do I figure out like, it's great at bouncing ideas like that around and like sparking ideas.
Nice.
It can also be really great for like explaining something in a different way. Like, here's a math word problem. I don't even understand what it's asking.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is it saying? It's actually really good at like paraphrasing and rephrasing or re-explaining something or things like that.
Mhm.
Um, it's also pretty good at just ideas for weirdly emotional things.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
I'm really scared about school starting. What can
Mm.
I like what do I do? And like it's all pretty basic stuff. Like,
Sure.
and I love that it also in that case throws in talk to your parent.
Talk to your parent or a trusted adult.
I don't mind that it throws that in.
Yeah.
But things like deep breathing and like knowing what you can control and what you can't control. Like, this was actually a real example, like from
Sure.
ours, and like, um writing out a plan for the day so you know what's going to be coming. And like, it gives really like kind advice on a
Nice.
lot of things. It's not I caution parents against like encouraging their kids to use that as their like first go-to for emotional
Sure.
support.
Right.
But as part of their toolkit, it can be really good because like they can ask things without feeling embarrassed about it. Like,
Yeah.
especially for middle school kids, it can be very like, I don't want to admit that, like, or is it normal that I feel worried about this?
For
Or,
sure. Yeah.
and it's very encouraging. Like, it has this really nice sort of encouraging teacher feel to it. Aw, you have a dog.
There's my puppers. This is my Millie.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think those are really great uses for something like Pinwheel GPT where, but I like what you said there where you're just still teaching them, hey, it's gonna give some like good information, but also maybe come ask me these things, and kind of help them see the balance where, this is going to have some stuff, but maybe I can help too.
Totally. And it also, that's one of the things that I do also love about being able to review the chats,
Yeah.
because if a kid asks something, especially if it's about something emotional or maybe like sensitive for them,
Mhm.
they know, like, you want them to know that you're going to be reviewing it. I'm always an
Right.
advocate for being transparent about that. Like, I am going to be
Same.
looking.
Yes,
But they don't always
exactly.
think about that in the moment. They
It's
just
so
ask.
true. Yeah.
But then, like, you can look at it, and not everything has to be a conversation,
Mhm.
but you know
Right.
something that's going on for them, and you can find opportunities to just sort of organically happen to be on that subject.
Right. Just weird. I don't know why I decided, but
Like, hey, school's coming up. I remember when I started middle school, I was really scared about.
yeah. I love it. It's perfect. It's like you said, you're going to be transparent, but you can also use it as a conversation starter where you don't have to be like, "So I was looking at your history and I noticed this." They know you're looking, but you can be like, "Oh, when I was starting school, just organically like when you're in the car or things like that." So I like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I've found that sometimes when I tie it into like, I saw this in your history and I want to talk about it, like, there's kind of a
Right.
shutdown because they feel like you caught me.
Right, right.
And it's
Yeah.
not that. So like, just bringing up that subject coincidentally can
Right.
sometimes be at least in our house, it's a better approach.
For sure, for sure. So one thing that, kids are using ChatGPT for, and I assume would probably use Pinwheel GPT for, is to try and do their homework for them. So what kind of protections are in place that can maybe help prevent that?
Again, that's where the monitoring comes in,
Nice. Yeah.
because they're gonna they're
Right.
going to. And there's a whole conversation to be had there about the way our educational system is constructed, that's so easy to do and that they feel
Right.
the need to, and like, there's a whole thing there. But
Right.
in the meanwhile, that's where the supervision piece comes in.
Yeah, that makes
They're
sense.
if they're asking obvious school
Write me
related
an essay
questions.
on the fall of Rome.
But also, it is actually also really good at one of the things it's also weirdly good at is when they get a project or an assignment that feels really big, it's
Yeah.
really good at helping break it down into smaller steps.
Oh, I like that.
Like, I have a paper due in 2 weeks, and it's gotta be this big paper, and I don't know, like, how do I approach this?
Yeah.
It's really good at being like, well, on the first day, you might want to find your topics. Would you like to brainstorm some topics?
Yeah.
And then, like, on the second day, you should do this. And so it helps break it down into
I love
manageable
that.
chunks. And like, so it can be a good support for school. You just, yeah, you want to keep
Yeah.
an eye out for them doing it with them. But that's why I advocate for Pinwheel GPT over
Right.
unsupervised AI, because at
Yeah.
least you'll know about it.
Yeah. Like, write me an essay on the fall of Rome. Hey, so that paper that you wrote, how much of that did you write?
Well, and one thing for parents to be aware of also is that a lot of the tools that kids use, like Canva for graphic stuff, and like
Right.
a lot of the tools that kids use now have generative AI built into the tool itself.
Right.
So, like, just be aware that that is any tool that has, like, that you would be writing a paper in,
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't have it already, it likely will have generative AI in it before
Yeah.
too long. And so supervising homework this year is going to be a whole new adventure
Whole new adventure
for
for sure.
everybody.
I know. I feel so bad for our teachers this year. They're going to be reading papers and like, nope, this one's generated. This one's generated.
But I also honestly, okay, and this may not be a popular answer among educators, but my personal opinion, if AI can do the work for a kid, it may be work they don't need to do anyway.
That's interesting. That's an
And if a
interesting thought.
teacher and if a teacher cannot articulate to the child why they need to, like, what this is accomplishing and why they need to do it, it might be an unnecessary assignment.
Yeah. I That's a super interesting way to look at that. Um, I'm curious. So
And like, because sometimes the point of an assignment is simply, I want to teach you the skill of being responsible for something. I want
right,
to teach you the skill of being able to take an instruction, go home, follow the instruction, and bring it back the next day. Like, sometimes that's the actual goal. It's not even so much about what they write or what they do.
right.
So it's like, well, if that's the goal, using AI might not be
Yeah.
that harmful because they're still
Right,
getting that
right.
part of it. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I
they
think
still
it's
turned it in on time and like had the right word count and all of that. Yeah.
exactly. So I'm like, I think one of the things, and I don't envy teachers for this because
Right.
within the constraints they operate in, this is going to be insane. And I get
Yeah.
that. But it's going to require understanding what they're trying to teach in a very different way than they've ever had to before. Like, they're
Yeah.
going to have to be able to articulate, this is the thing, and how does that impact, like, if you do the thinking yourself or not do the thinking yourself, does that affect whether or not you've gotten the lesson that I'm trying to get across to you?
Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. Um, and this is kind of a quick, easy answer for you. I assume that the Pinwheel GPT app is available to download on the Pinwheel phone. Yeah.
It is indeed. It is available
Nice.
in the Pinwheel app library, and it is available on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store.
Right.
um, so yes, all of the above.
All the
And
above.
it is a freemium app. Like, you get, I think non-Pinwheel subscribers get, like, kids get 20 free inquiries a month or
Okay.
20 free conversations, and Pinwheel subscribers get like 40, and then
Mhm.
you can pay for unlimited
Oh, nice.
conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. So speaking of parents who are already managing Pinwheel phones, through the caregiver portal, if they're also managing Pinwheel GPT, is it the same portal or am I gonna have to be logging into 2 different things?
separate portal for the
Yeah.
moment.
Bummer.
But you can use the same login credentials.
Okay.
So like for the Pinwheel GPT app, if you've got a kid username and password and you install Pinwheel GPT for them on their phone, you can log into the Pinwheel GPT app with their same username and password.
Okay.
So you don't have to set up a whole nother account or remember a whole nother
Sure.
password. And then on the parent side on your phone, it's the Pinwheel GPT app. But again, you can log in with your same username and password.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it's at least like, it's, to me, that's the hard part of it. Like I look forward to the day when they tie it all together into one neat
Yeah.
little portal, but
Right.
I get why it wasn't that way to begin with.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. It just would obviously be so much nicer to have one location to check all that stuff out.
I'm like,
Um,
give it a few months. That
yeah,
may
you may get
happen.
there. Yeah.
Gotta start somewhere.
I've influenced stuff on Pinwheel before, so
You have. That's why I'm like, you're full of great ideas. I'm like, what else you got?
yeah. No, I love the platforms. Like I know Pinwheel was one of the first to market in this kids safe smartphone space. Wow, that was like a tongue twister that I didn't even know. But it's getting increasingly crowded. There's a lot more people coming to the table here. So what do you think, and I know my answer, but what do you think sets Pinwheel apart from like the competition?
Oh man, now I'm curious about your answer. I know what mine is. I'm curious your perspective.
I'll say it after yours for sure.
Okay. I will say that for me, one of the key, well, the two. Okay, wait, I've got a lot of them.
The one, the two. No, there's 5.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, nope, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
To me, Pinwheel is a better choice for like first phone and
Mhm.
for like kids, like when you're first getting into it and you don't know how they're going to do with it. You don't know how you're going to do with it. You don't like, it's all a big, like, I don't know, because since it doesn't have a web browser, it doesn't have social media, so much of it is in the parent control. You've got a lot more like a solid place to stand to start that journey with them. And it's really easy to lock it down to protect their sleep at night and to make it like essentially useless when you don't want them to be doing all of the things. And in that early stage of the journey, the two things that matter most for me are, one, the text history.
Mhm.
Because in the same way that like my parents taught me how to answer a phone politely, like literally learning how to speak on the phone and not just hang up in the middle of a sentence
Right.
is actually a skill. Learning how to text in a way that like keeps the other person's feelings in mind and like to not get all upset if somebody doesn't respond right away. Like there are skills involved just in texting. And so like being able to see all of that matters and has really mattered for me and for our journey. And then the app information. And so that when I'm choosing apps for my kid, I know what's in it.
Right.
So that I'm not surprised by things like seriously, and I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but there's a period tracker app.
Oh, sure.
On the market that has a community function.
Mm.
So you've got private chat and direct messaging in a period tracker app marketed to young teenage girls. What could go wrong there?
Yeah, nothing at all. It's perfect.
And like, but because like, who would expect that would be there?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you want to know that. And so for me, on
For sure.
other phones, you either don't have any apps at all, or you have access to like the whole Google Play Store, but the information in the Google Play Store is not designed to help a parent make a good choice.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like for me, the text history and the app information, but also the scheduling, that matters to me.
Yeah, so that's one of my number ones is the scheduling, and the way I can categorize apps into like specific groups where I'm like, okay, this group of apps is going to be available during school time and this group of apps is going to be available during bedtime. I think that is super helpful for parents. I mean, and the problem is that it takes a lot of effort to kind of like set all of it up. But then once you've got it set up, you're like, okay, I'm not going to be worried that they're going to be on YouTube during school because I've got that all. I mean, they don't have YouTube anyway, but something like that. But like not, some game app, in the middle of school or, things like that. And then the like, chore kind of checklist thing. I love, love, love that.
I
Um,
do too.
and
The confetti.
I know. And then the ability to put it on whatever phone service that you already have. I think that is like one thing that none of the other phones have. And I think that's so helpful for parents to be like, oh, okay, like this is my Verizon bill and I'm done, instead of like, oh, okay, well, your service is here and your service is there. It's just so simple to have it all on, one platform.
Totally. And even if you end up with, because like mine, I ended up with my daughter on a different cell service just because it was cheaper than putting her on AT&T, which is what I have for mine.
Yeah.
But it's also, I got to pick, like, because of the sub carriers that are cheaper.
Yeah.
Which one works best in your area is not always going to be the same. And so, yeah, with some of the other phones, it's like luck of the draw. It may or may not work well in your area.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, there's
having
definitely
that freedom does matter.
I think it does for sure. So that's one of the things I like the most. But as we were talking, the Google Play Store. So last week, I was talking to Amy Winder Newton, who is part of the governor's office here in Utah, and she was asking me about like how to tell with the app ratings, and I'm like, yeah, well, there are apps that are rated E for everyone, but have user generated content that could be, explicit. And so like you were saying, the App Store isn't a really good indication of like, hey, this one's rated E for everyone, but they can access explicit content because it's user generated.
Yeah. And yes, and I'm so glad that you had a chance to tell her about that because like 90, like more than 90% of the apps in the Google Play Store are rated E for everyone. But like you said, they can still contain explicit content. They can still contain, the one that drives me crazy, that does. But also, when there's an app that's rated E for everyone, but if you read the developer's own privacy policy and terms and conditions, it says in there, not intended for use by minors. Like their own terms and conditions say this app is intended for use by adults 18 and older.
Oh
but
my
it's
goodness.
still shown in the Google Play Store as rated E for everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and regardless of the reason why, just that on its face, I'm like, this is why that rating is useless.
Right.
Because it doesn't even match with what they say.
Yeah.
So,
so that's why the like descriptions there in like the Pinwheel parent portal, when you're allowing and denying, like, hey, this is everything that this app can do, because it's a super curated app store in the Pinwheel portal, and so you guys have done all the things with the app to like see what kind of things they can do, and so you've got all of that basically listed out, so parents can make the decision for themselves, for sure.
Yeah, and that's like, and more, that's where that's evolving. And what I've come to believe in is I'm like, every family's different. Every kid is different. Every family has different concerns. There's so much variation. And it's really hard to make the right decision when you literally cannot know what is in an app without using it, and without using it extensively.
Right. Because without asking it how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. We keep going.
Yeah. Oh no, it was all good. Yeah, it's just that the information really, like, if I could wave my magic wand and do anything in the world, it would be that we would have transparent information on all devices and all apps and all, like, transparent information about what's really in there.
Yeah.
like just that would make such a difference.
Yeah, for sure. So, Shelley, we've been talking for almost an hour. Been a great conversation. I loved it. Is there anything that we missed that we still want to talk about with AI, with Pinwheel, with Pinwheel GPT, all of the above?
Okay, this is just one of my go-to bits of advice that I do love to share with parents. I'm sure this is something you tell parents too, but it just always bears repeating when we're venturing into new technologies and a new school year. When you are supervising and you're reviewing what your kids have been doing, always start from a place of curiosity and not freak out or judgment.
Love that.
Always start with why? What were you thinking? And assuming that they meant well.
Yeah.
Because so often, like the way we read into something is so not what they meant or what motivated them. And like, if you want to keep those open lines of communication, start with curiosity anytime you're reviewing stuff.
I love that so much because, and yeah, I do say that like, hey, when you come across something, your first reaction might be to freak out, and if that's the
Normal.
case, like go freak out, and then like after you've calmed down, then approach your child, like, and make sure it's, like you said, from a place of curiosity, from a place of love, like, they are just as curious as the next person. And so, when my son comes to me and says, hey, I saw something inappropriate, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry that happened. Let's look at how that happened so we can maybe block that for the future, because I'm not an idiot. Like, the technology is going to not be perfect, like we talked about earlier. There's always going to be ways around it. There's going to be things that get through, and so you can't just rely on the technology to parent for you. You've got to like get involved, and then again, when you do see something, I can get flagged, say, hey, my son was looking up something with sexual content, and I could freak out and go to him and be like, I can't believe we've talked about this, et cetera, et cetera. That's not gonna like make him want to come and tell me about that in the future. It's just
Exactly.
going to, terrify him and be like, okay, well, I know I get in super trouble, so I'm gonna hide it a little better next time.
Exactly. And that, like, to get through the middle school and teen years and get them to like healthy adulthood with technology,
Yes.
those open lines of communication are really critical.
Yeah, totally agree. So I'm glad we ended with that. It seems like all of my interviews, like the golden nugget is like right here at the end. So, if I mean, obviously, if you're listening now, you've stayed through the whole thing, but make sure all of them you're going through all of it, because we get these really good nuggets right at the end every time. So,
Yeah, I've noticed that too. There's a couple
yeah,
of yours that I can't think who right now, but there was one I listened to not long ago that like right at
yeah.
the end there was a moment of like, oh, that was great.
I know, right? And it's like, oh yeah, why did like we should have had this as the hook? Like, this is perfect.
That's the joy of going live. You just
Right?
never know when the things are going to show up. You just have
Yeah.
faith that they will.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so much.
yes, thank you. It's been super awesome to talk to you about this. So, definitely if you're a parent, go check out Pinwheel GPT. I think it's really cool. I mean, like I said, I haven't tested it out, but like from what I've looked at, I'm like that seems great, so it's got this parental oversight, but it still kind of allows them to explore this new technology that everybody's talking about. And of course, the kid is going to want to use it because everybody's talking about ChatGPT. So, allowing them to have that kind of access, but with some monitoring in place, I think is super important.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you. And you can check out Pinwheel. I will have the links in the description, and we will see you guys next time.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's always lovely to see you and talk to you. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Shelley.
Awesome. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.